As we discussed previously, we're going to be using an object-based hierarchical representation for our game objects. So the first thing we need to do is create our basemost class, which is going to be game object. And we can just use the default class. And of course, this needs to be a public class. And also because we only ever want to use this as a base class, it's never going to be instantiated on its own, we can make it an abstract class. That basically means that it only exists to be inherited from. It's never going to do anything different. And we need to have a few things in common between all of our game objects. Anything that every game object is going to share is going to be pushed into this file. There are currently about 3 things that we're concerned about. One of them is the position of the game object on screen. Remember, all of our game objects are dynamic and they can interact with other game objects in the world. So we need to know where they actually exist in that world. So we're going to go ahead and create a getter method that gives you back a rectangle that represents that object's position on the screen. And we'll make this an abstract getter because depending on how we've set up our object, we may want to handle that a little bit differently. And the rectangle itself is in the Microsoft.xna.framework namespace. We also want to both update and draw our game objects. And we'll pass into our update method the elapsed time, which we'll pass as a float. And that's the amount of time that occurs between the previous frame and this frame. And we'll again make these abstract methods because how we actually implement them is going to vary depending on what particular game object we are creating. And in our draw, we will also pass in the float elapsed time, which we will need for our animations. And we'll also pass in the sprite batch. And this is another special class offered to us by XNA, which we'll be using extensively for rendering 2D images, or sprites as we call them in gaming parlance. And we'll explain in a little bit more about how that actually works. And of course, one final task we need to do is document our file. And we have our completed file.